Okay, well, we can continue talking about this. Let me just introduce what we're going to do today. This is a picture of what it's going to look like, and we're going to try to give our recommendations for each of these openings. All right, Kostya, what do you like?
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of options against e4, e5, obviously. And again, there is this question of, kind of like what's objectively best versus what might be better for like players of different levels. So for e4, e5, I guess my ideal like opening choice would be something that combines a variation that is both objectively like sound and playable, and also like introduces the player to some kind of like fun or interesting positions, especially ones like where they're attacking. So for lower levels, when someone is starting out, I'm a big fan of something like either, it's going to be hard to just choose one, but I'll try to figure it out. I'm a big fan of something like either the Evans Gambit or the Scotch Gambit, because I think these are like really healthy openings.
Yeah.
The ideas of initiative are very, very clear, especially the Evans for players that are, I'm going to say like below 1500 is just a really dangerous line, number one. Like, so you can score a lot of wins with it if you enjoy winning, but also like teaches you how to play with the initiative, teaches you how to play down a pawn and not trying to like just win it back immediately. So it's like actually a really, I think, useful set of positions that you can play from playing the Evans. So I guess I'll say my final answer is going to be Italian game / Evans. So you can also play the Italian game in a slow version with like D3 and C3. And of course, this is one that objectively you can play at any level, but also gives you options to do stuff like the Scotch Gambit, the Evans Gambit, or just to eventually just play it slow. I've quite a few students actually that started out playing something like the Evans or maybe even the fried liver. And then once they started playing some more experienced opponents who weren't just like losing out of the opening, then they learned to switch over to kind of like a slower build up with like the Italian game with D3, C3, knight D2, knight F1, knight G3, like these middle game plans, and then playing for that kingside attack. And I think that's kind of like a mature progression. And I'll just say then once someone I think reaches a range of like maybe 1800 to 2000, if they really like want to start learning the Ruy Lopez, like that would be really good for their development, but ultimately probably not like super necessary.
Kostya, let me ask you, while I'm setting this up as a dragon expert, like when I was a kid, bishop g5 was considered like the thing to do, and nowadays it's really fallen out of favor. Yeah, it's like that used to be like the thing. So is it easy to explain why bishop g5 is no longer the hot dog and there people are playing all these weird moves?
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is that against the Najdorf in particular, you can pose a lot of problems without having to study like the full Negi book. So I'll probably stick with my H3 recommendation as just being kind of a good middle ground between having a lot of dangerous ideas, but without needing to have to like study a bunch of lines. I mean, it's a weird one, the bishop g5 Najdorf. It's definitely a position that I've never wanted to touch from either side. Because from black's point of view, it feels super dangerous to have to go grab the pawn. And then from white's point of view, I mean, your position is extremely, suspect. Like you've given up the b2 pawn and you got to know a bunch of lines. You might end up 2-3 pawns down in some position, but you have enough comp to make it work. And you got to know like 20 moves of theory. I actually had a student who prepared the line. I don't even remember whether he prepared it from white's point of view or from black's point of view, but he only prepared it to like move 19 or something. And his opponent knew it clearly a couple moves deeper than that and won, and I don't even remember what color he had. It didn't matter ultimately,
Right.
But his opponent was slightly higher rated, slightly better prepared, and he had like no chance in that position, even though he was actually very well prepared for like a 2200 rated player. So, I think from white's point of view, it just doesn't feel like the most practical thing in the world, because you could also nowadays play something like a rook g1 or knight b3 or an a3 and pose some problems for a couple of games, and then move on to something else.
Right. And Eugene's saying a lot of bishop g5s are a memory contest, definitely. And I guess another point we should add about bishop g5 is black has so many different options after bishop g5 that it's the real onus on white to learn everything. Okay, Kostya, what do you got for us for the Najdorf? You're going to say h3.
Yeah, for developing players who like just want like a solid repertoire that helps them improve their game while like playing something kind of known and sound. So for against the Najdorf, I'm still a big believer in the h3 lines, and so obviously that's what I suggested in my Sicilian book, and I've always felt like this was a nice mix of kind of like both a line that has like a very solid strategic foundation, like just trying to gain some space with g4, trying to get the bishop to g2 in a lot of positions where it's doing good work on the diagonal, combined with posing a lot of problems for black, because if they go for one of the typical like Najdorf setups, like with e6, then white gets a very quick like g4, g5, and it can often get a nice version of like the Keres attack, which is often, basically like black doesn't really allow it that much anymore. So yeah, I think h3 is still a lot of fun to play. I'm not sure. Get my book, study some players, Vichy, Nepo, a bunch of these guys like the h3 lines still.
Yeah, absolutely. Against the French in general. Kostya, what do you got for us?
So I think I would echo what you guys are saying in that knight c3 seems like objectively the most dangerous move, but like as a former French player, I was always happy to see knight c3, and I didn't even play the winner war. I can't imagine how happy winner war players are to see knight c3, but even as like a knight f6 Steinitz player, I was always happy to get that closed structure where white is like maybe attacking on the king side. I'm getting like the queen side counterplay. I know like the end games pretty well. I was always kind of happy in that territory. That's not necessarily a reason to avoid it for white if you think it's critical, but one line that I was always unhappy to see was the 92 French, the Tarrasch. And I would feel like seeing it from white's point of view more recently, because I have a lot of like e4 playing students, and of course the French is a big thing to look at. I think the 92 French is just kind of like the simplest for white to just get like a very playable and healthy position, and also a position that to me just feels difficult for black, especially when black, I could go to a board if we want, but like when black plays knight f6 on move 3, as most French players like to do, then these lines with e5 and knight d7, the bishop on c8 is always just stuck and a big problem. So yeah, I think from a practical point of view, the knight d2 French is the way to go.
Let's go to the board just for half a second then. And just to clarify a couple of these things. So let's put this on the board. And I'm going to ask David as well. So after knight f6, there's the c5 move, of course, too. Which system do you like here, Kostya?
In this move order, I like both, but I would probably go with knight e2 and then knight df3. So bishop d3 here.
Oh, bishop d3 first, right? The old school thing. Yeah, got it. Okay. So
because the second option is to go like knight gf3. Oh, you meant the f4 line also.
There's even f4 as well.
Oh, yeah. I'm not a huge fan of that one, but I kind of like this system, right?
Okay. No, this is fine. This is a little bit annoying for black. Kostya, what are you thinking?
Okay, against the Caro, again, I definitely agree the advance is going to be kind of like the most objectively powerful line. So let me take a Eugene approach here. For like professional players, I'll definitely go with the advanced variation. But for club players, or as we lovingly call them, peasants, I'm quite fond actually of the exchange Caro with bishop d3. So not the pawn of attack, but with bishop d3, and then putting the pawn on c3.
Yeah.
Funny enough, Kostya, that's actually our recommended line before it got popular in our white book.
Oh, very cool. Nice. Yeah, let me show a couple moves.
Let me just change
to be more specific.
Yeah.
There's a famous game, Fischer against Petrosian, when that system was played at the highest level.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, take us through it, Kostya.
Right. So the line I'm talking about here is to take bishop d3, knight c6, c3, and then very specifically not developing the knight to f3 after, let's say, knight f6, but rather going bishop f4, so that on bishop g4 we can play this move queen b3 that's kind of annoying for black. I think if white plays an early knight f3, then black just pins with bishop g4, and it's usually pretty comfortable. But in this move order, we kind of delay it, and then black has to decide whether they want to go for these bishop g4, queen b3 lines, or if they want to block in their bishop with like e6, or if they want to play like g6 here, which kind of has its own drawbacks because the bishop doesn't really want to be on g7 in this position. So I think this is actually a pretty simple and healthy line for white to play. Just kind of play eventually, for example, after e6, then white comes out with knight f3, castles, puts the rooks on the e file, and just kind of tries to use this e5 square. And I think it's just very simple for white, and you just get a nice flexible position without having to know a whole lot of theory, you know, against the Caro. Because I think the Caro is like really solid, and even if you study a lot of lines in e5, it's like not a guarantee that you're going to get a position that you're super comfortable with. It's kind of like Winnower-esque in that sense to me. So yeah, this would be my rec for the club players.
Kostya, what are you thinking for your Scandi?
So I have a slightly different recommendation. I'll probably need the board for this one.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm definitely a fan of all this, queen a5, d4, and but I like the line without bishop d2. I think it's actually pretty dangerous. So I think usually black starts with either knight f6 or c6 here. I would go knight f3.
Okay.
And on,
Let's say c6 because they love to do that thing.
So c6, I think is probably the main move. I would go bishop c4. And here's where black probably chooses between like bishop f5 and bishop g4.
Let's do bishop g4 because I think the Shirov idea was just to not have this annoyance.
Right. Okay, so you're right. So here I would go h3. Probably bishop h5.
Yeah.
And then g4, bishop g6, and I'd play for these knight e5 lines.
Okay. Yeah. And I think we should just bear in mind that if people want to use this, what a lot of Scandi players will do here is they'll just take the thing and play this setup.
Right.
The Scandi setup, you know.
This is like the John Bartholomew approach. He loves this.
Yeah. Well, that's the way they do it, and it's in honor of the Scandi players, the terrible Scandi players. It is very solid. It's incredibly solid, though you have a little bit less space and you don't have the bishop. Kostya, how would you like to christen this opening?
I'm having a tough time. I would I don't know. Can we just call it like a
The Kostya? You want to call it the Kostya?
No, it's not my line. Can we just call it like an early knight e5 line? Because another one of the ideas, like if black, let's say, plays bishop g4 in this position, is to again go like h3, g4. And really the point of this one is that not only are we trying to play h4 and h5 here, is this typical like idea to trap the bishop in and get black to play h6 so we can take on g6 and wreck their structure. But if black plays a move like knight d7, there's actually a really strong idea for white to play knight c4 in this position. Oh, we're not on the board.
Sorry,
No,
I got it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I was writing in the stuff. Yeah.
Oh, no worries. So yeah, this knight c4 move is also a very annoying threat for black because the queen is forced back to a6. White goes bishop f4, and already knight d6 is in the air, and this is really dangerous. Queen c6, d5. That's why after the move knight e5, I think black has to play e6 in this position just to survive. The key difference being knight c4, queen a6, bishop f4, queen c6. There's no d5 here.
Right.
So black saves themselves because of this tempo. But then after e6, h4, this is just like super dangerous. And yeah, if the Scandi player is just kind of like winging it here, I think they're going to have a really, really tough time figuring this one out. So this seems pretty dangerous to me.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So I'm just calling it the early knight e5, if that's okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, Kostya, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm with you, Jesse. I always refer to this one as the Pirc 150 attack. Right. So bishop e3, queen d2. No, I just think it's like a really just simple system to play, and you get a nice natural attacking plan. You go bishop e3, queen d2, h4, h5. I recommend players to not commit to f3 or knight f3 too early, but decide based on black setup. Sometimes you want knight f3, sometimes you want the knight to come out to h3, and you want to put the pawn on f3. So that's the only thing where players kind of go wrong. I think they play f3 really quickly because it's not quite the same thing as an English attack. But yeah, I'm with you. I think this is the both the practical and objectively one of the best lines to play.
Okay, Kostya, what do you got against this dragon thing?
Just put 9 castles long. Or
nine castles long. Okay.
Understood.
That's funny, yeah.
I mean, I like the bishop c4 lines. I just think at lower levels, if you castle long in that position, you'll get to play the bishop c4 lines, but like again, like up to tempi, because you just take on c4.
Okay, wait. So not the Yugoslav. Not
He's playing the Yugoslav, but he's saying if you castle queenside instead of bishop c4, he's expecting black to still just play rook c8, knight e5, knight c4 as if you had played the bishop c4 line.
Right. Which I think happens
it's like what I said about the Leningrad Dutch against London players. It's like you played the King's Indian defense, but like you got to just play f5 over your knight when you wanted to.
I'm going to change it then to 9 castles long.
You can put that for me too if you want, Jesse, because that.
Good question, guys, from the chat and from me. What if I played the accelerate dragon?
Well, right. I mean, we're going to get to that for sure. We're going to get to that for sure. I think the accelerated is fantastic. So, David, you want me to change you to 9 castles?
You can if Kostya's being that specific, because my recommendation would be the same.
Because I think it's wildly different, the two things. Let's see here.
Yeah.
So, because, you know, Fischer was, I would say what Fischer did was the Yugoslav. And then this 9 castles thing is its own different new beast.
So just to be clear, we're saying Yugoslav is specifically like bishop c4, like that variation?
That's my understanding of it. Why don't we just show people what we're talking about?
Yeah, I thought bishop e3, f3 was the Yugoslav.
Yeah, I just think of it as like kind of English attack, but against the dragon.
So we're about to talk about the accelerated, and the accelerated leaves white less options, and we'll get into why. But here, right, we've got bishop e3 or bishop c4, and I guess to my mind bishop c4 is the Yugoslav, if that makes sense.
Whoa.
Yeah, usually players here start with bishop e3.
Bishop e3 first, because knight g4 is met by bishop b5 check.
Yeah, okay, but you're still playing
and then f3 here, f3 queen d2, and then white decides.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least that's like the modern move order. And then you choose between bishop c4 or castles.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so
by
that's
modern, Kostya means since Bobby.
Well, we're going to talk about bishop c4 because that's where the accelerated comes in, and it will. Well, we'll let Eugene speak to it. And we'll come back. How about that? We'll let Eugene have his say. Well, we got where our board is looking pretty full and interesting now. Kostya, what do you got for us for e6 Sicilian?
Yes, I think I'll split my recommendations up here as well. If we could go back to the board.
Okay, sure.
So I'll say for like pro players, super ambitious folks, I'm totally with David, the queen f3 line nowadays. I think just the more I look at it, because I was playing the Taimano for a couple of years, just the more dangerous it felt from Black's point of view. And I ultimately never really found the solution I was that happy with. In fact, I even started playing this with White in a couple of games, and that was a lot of fun. But if you're in the lower range, like under 2000, I don't think these lines are really like worth studying at all. I think there are like a lot of simpler options, and like Jesse mentioned, the bishop d3 line is easy enough. Also, another line I think that I would recommend to players that are, let's say, starting out and they just want to get something simple and they don't want to study theory, we don't want them studying theory, would be just to take on c6 here. I think Black should go bc, because dc this endgame is not fun, where Black is committed to e6, so white is happy here. Right. So Black will probably go bc, and then the setup is essentially like bishop d3, put the knight on d2, castle kingside, b3, bishop b2, f4, queen e2, rook a1. It's like super simple. Just get your bishop to b2, get the queen to e2, rook a1, f4. Then you can decide how to attack on the king side. You can play c4 in some positions. It's like, okay, just very, very simple. You get a clear plan. You get to play an open Sicilian. You don't have to study a bunch of theory. And it's not easy for black at lower levels with the bishop on c8.
Right.
Or at any level. I think that's a very interesting structure to learn. It's got a lot of potential in it. And you can still play queen f3 to g3 if you want.
Yeah, a lot of options there. I also want to mention against the Kann with a6. We obviously don't have these knight takes c6 lines. I'm a big fan of this line with bishop d3 and specifically delaying knight coming out to c3 because the advantage of this one is that if black plays their like typical b5, there's a lot of Kann players. I have one student who will play b5 on autopilot. This actually can be a real mistake if the knight is not yet on c3 because white can crack black with a4 here, and then after b4 the knight comes out to d2 and gets this like amazing square on c4.
Right.
Whereas if the knight was on c3 and white had to move it away, then that position is fine for black. The knight doesn't find a good square. And so the idea behind
variation,
this one,
now that variation you could truly call all pawns and no hope because black's moved nothing but pawns. Also all weaknesses and no hope.
Yeah, literally just all not fun. So what most players will do is they'll delay it. They'll play their typical moves like queen c7, castles, knight f6, queen e2. And basically the idea here for white is to essentially either wait for black to play b5 and then we'll go a4. Or at some point, white will simply play c4 and then bring the knight out to c3 behind it. So d6, for example, c4, knight comes out to c3, bishop d2, rook a e1 again, king h1, f4. I think white's position, it doesn't exactly play itself. You should look at some games here, but it's like a very simple setup to learn. We're playing on the king side. We're playing for either this e4, e5 break or f5 or even g4, g5, all of like the typical Sicilian attacking ideas. They come into play here. So against the Kann, I'm a big fan of this one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, good. Well, that was a great show, guys. I got a lot out of it. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, knight f3, d3 against the Caro. I remember that.
That's right.
I remember that.
That's the refutation according to Lila.
Yeah, really beautiful board that we got there at the end, too. Yeah. Okay, well, I think the next show at some point, right, has to be our recommendations against the various responses to d4 as well. Maybe we can do another board like this. Yeah. All right.